16th century Europe? Yeah, that was a seriously brutal time in history. Mass hysteria and religious doctrine had pretty much everyone seeing witches and demons behind every corner, in everything they did. All that fear of hellfire? It led to this whole wave of so-called witch hunters popping up. Among them was the notorious Peter Binsfeld, a guy who, get this, apparently had a real taste for torture and a deep-seated hatred for Protestants. But hear us the kicker. Binsfeld was actually a pretty respected dude in his day. His writings on demonology and witches, some people still read them today. Maybe his most famous gig, though, was categorizing the 7 princes of hell. These were 7 top-tier demon lords, basically sinners being punished for specific nasty stuff they did while they were alive. Now, nobody really knows what hell is like, or if it's even a real place. But the official line was, once you're in, you're not getting out. And Binsfeld's whole point in describing these 7 princes was to scare the living daylights out of people so they de-straighten up and fly right in this life because, let us be honest, as morbidly fascinating as these characters might sound, they're definitely not the kind of crowd you'd want to hang with. So, folks tried their best to avoid any association. But hey, if you just couldn't kick those bad habits, well, you were going to find out who your roommates in the afterlife would be. Alright, so let's dive in and meet these infamous noblemen. One by one. King of Pride. Lucifer, a tragic song of fallen light. Lucifer, the morning star, even the name itself is packed with drama, right? Just picture it. Out of all creation, he was once the closest to God, the peak of wisdom and beauty, commander of all angels, decked out in dazzling light. Now, as some ancient texts and later epics, like John Milton's masterpiece Paradise Lost, paint him, Lucifer wasn't born evil. His tragedy came from his insatiable pride, this ultimate arrogance, this belief that his own will should be above everything, even above the Creator's. Lucifer's fall was all about extreme pride and rebellion. Legend has it that after God created humans and declared his son would have supreme glory, he ordered all angels to bow down to Adam, the first human. Lucifer saw this as a total insult to his dignity and refused. He wasn't about to be beneath humans, or even beneath the Son of God. So, he rallied his troops, and a whopping 1/3 of heaven's angels followed him into a rebellion that was doomed from the start. This war in heaven was so brutal, it supposedly made the universe tremble. Archangel Michael led the loyal angel army. They fought hard, and in the end, the rebels were crushed. Lucifer and his fallen angels plummeted like a meteor shower from the heights of glory into an eternal abyss of darkness. Down in hell, Lucifer set up his own kingdom and tried to get revenge on the human world. He took the form of a serpent, snuck into the Garden of Eden, and tempted Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, leading to humanity's fall. This act made him a symbol of sin and corruption, and it also cemented his top dog status in hell. In some legends, Lucifer and Satan are considered one and the same, the embodiment of evil. His story isn't just a simple warning against pride, it's more like a sad song about free will, ambition, and destruction. His beef with God was the ultimate challenge from a created being to the Creator. Lucifer chose a one-way ticket to eternal darkness in exchange for a moment of autonomy. He's a complex and fascinating figure, both the face of evil and, in a way, the ultimate rebel. That's why he's gotten so much sympathy and so many different takes in later art and literature. Demon of envy, Leviathan, deep-sea resentment, and the beast of chaos. Leviathan, you hear that name in the book of Job, Psalms, and Isaiah. It's usually pictured as this enormous, terrifying sea monster, a symbol of God's awesome creative power and a kind of raw, untamable chaos that humans just can't control. Its scales are supposedly unbreakable. Its breath can set coals on fire, and just seeing it is enough to make even the toughest warriors quake in their boots. In the Old Testament, Leviathan was created by God. Originally, it wasn't a symbol of evil, but more like a sacrifice for the holy ones at the end of the world. It's described as a coiling serpent, living in the deep ocean. So, how did this monster, which pretty much represents the power of nature itself, get linked with a sneaky human emotion like envy? Well, in later demonology, Leviathan became a prince of hell, representing envy. This connection might be because envy itself is like a monster lurking in the deep sea of the human heart. Once it's awakened, It unleashes massive destructive power, swallowing up reason and peace. Envious people can't stand to see others happy, talented, or successful. They'd rather see everything good dragged into a whirlpool of destruction, just like Leviathan stirring up the ocean, causing storms and shipwrecks. Leviathan's story with God is less about direct rebellion and more about it being a symbol of this raw, untamable force that God created, but is hard to handle. It's a reminder that even in an orderly universe, chaos is always lurking beneath the surface. And when that chaos teams up with the dark side of human nature, envy, its destructive power multiplies. It's not a direct rebel like Lucifer, but the negative force it represents is still a major threat to divine order. Spirit of wrath. Satan, the eternal adversary and incarnation of fury. Satan. In Hebrew, the name means enemy, accuser, or obstructor. Originally, it wasn't the name of a specific demon, but more like a role or a job title. In the book of Job, he wanders between heaven and earth, shows up before God kind of like goddess intelligence chief, questioning the purity of Job's faith and getting permission to bring down suffering to test him. In that story, he's more like a cold, calculating prosecutor. But by the New Testament era, especially in the Gospels and Revelation, Satan's image becomes way more evil and specific. He's called the ruler of this world, the ancient serpent, the devil, the ultimate enemy who tempts Jesus, fights against God's plan, and tries to destroy believers. Peter Binsfeld linked him with wrath, and it's not hard to see why. Satan's actions are packed with hostility and a desire to destroy God's creation, especially humans. His anger is this constant, unyielding resentment aimed right at the divine order. His story with God is an ongoing war throughout the Bible. From the temptation in the Garden of Eden to testing Jesus in the wilderness, all the way to the prophecy of the final battle between good and evil, Satan is always the one stirring up rebellion, spreading lies, and fanning the flames of anger. His wrath isn't just an emotional outburst, it's a state of being. A destructive will totally opposed to divine love and creative power. When we get swept up in uncontrollable rage, wanting to hurt others or destroy everything without thinking of the consequences, maybe that S when we feel a little flicker of Satan's dark fire. Lord of Sloth. Belphegor, the whisperer of wasted time. Belphegor, this name might not be as much of a household name as the first three, but the sloth he represents is a seriously corrosive human weakness. His origins can be traced back to Baal Peor, a mountain god worshipped by the ancient Moabites. According to the Book of Numbers, the Israelites were lured into participating in immoral rituals for this deity on Mount Peor. In Demonology, Belphegor is portrayed as a cunning tempter. He doesn't always show up looking all fierce and terrifying. Instead, he might use more deceptive tactics like promising people they can get rich quick through some clever invention or shortcut, thereby luring them into laziness and inaction. He might even whisper in people's ears while they're praying or doing good deeds, making them feel bored and discouraged so they just give up. The sloth Belphegor stands for, in medieval monastic life, was initially understood as something deeper, like spiritual dryness or the noonday demon. It made monks feel numb and hopeless about prayer, work, and their sacred duties. Later, this idea broadened to everyday life, covering all kinds of negativity, procrastination, dodging responsibility, and mental sluggishness. His conflict with God is all about him trying to break down people's will to pursue virtue and fulfill their divine missions, letting them slowly sink into idleness and spiritual emptiness, eventually drifting far away from God's light. Incarnation of greed. Mammon, forger of golden shackles. The word mammon comes from Aramaic and originally just meant wealth, money, or assets. The main reason it became the name of an infamous demon is thanks to that hard-hitting warning from Jesus in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and mammon. This statement directly puts worshipping mammon on the same level as being opposed to faith in God. Mammon isn't really a fallen angel with a complicated backstory. He's more like the personification of the sin of greed itself. He represents an unhealthy, endless craving for material wealth and all the evils that come with its stinginess, fraud, exploitation, betrayal, even violence. Mammon tempts people into believing that money is the only measure of value, the only source of happiness, turning them into slaves of wealth instead of its masters. His conflict with God is that he tries to replace spiritual pursuits with material temptations, challenging sacred values with worldly power. In Mammon's eyes, everything has a price tag. Everything can be bought and sold, including conscience, emotions, and souls. When a society worships money too much, when individuals make accumulating wealth their sole purpose in life, Mammon's invisible influence has already quietly taken over. Countless literary works, from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales to Balzac's The Human Comedy, deeply reveal how Mammon twists human nature and rots society. Source of gluttony. Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, from the abyss of desire. Beelzebub, just the name itself sounds like it's got an ominous buzz to it. His best-known title is Lord of the Flies, a nickname loaded with implications of filth, decay, and plague. In the Bible, in 2 Kings, Beelzebub was originally Baal-zebub, a god worshipped by the Philistines in the Canaanite city of Ekron, meaning Lord of the High Place or Prince Baal. Later, in Jewish and Christian traditions, the name got demonized and linked with flies, possibly as a way to diss and mock his pagan divinity. In the demon hierarchy, Beelzebub is usually considered one of hell's most powerful kings, sometimes even seen as second only to Lucifer. He represents gluttony. And we're not just talking about overeating here, it refers to all kinds of overindulgence and unrestrained consumption. Whether it's an insatiable appetite for food, drink, power, information, or any sensory pleasure, it all falls under his domain. Beelzebub's, Lord of the Flies, image is super symbolic. Flies are drawn to rot, symbolizing a sick fascination with corrupt things. Swarms of flies also suggest a plague-like spread and something that's hard to shake off. He tempts people to endlessly try to fill their inner emptiness, but all they get is a moment of satisfaction followed by even deeper desires. His conflict with God is about luring humans into indulging in the fleeting pleasures of the material world, making them forget to nourish their souls or strive for the divine. He turns people into something like livestock, only driven by consumption, eventually rotting in the muck of their own desires. Flame of lust. Asmodeus, destructive passion and the chains of desire. Asmodeus, this prince of hell, plays a major role in Jewish legends and the deuterocanonical book of Tobit, which Catholics and Eastern Orthodox folks consider canon. His name might come from Eshma-Deva, an evil deity in Persian Zoroastrianism, where Eshma means wrath, fury, or desire, and Deva means evil spirit. That right there already hints at his connection to out-of-control emotions. In the book of Tobit, Asmodeus is crazy obsessed with a young woman named Sarah. He kills 7 of her husbands one by one on their wedding night, stopping them from consummating the marriage. His actions are full of destructive jealousy and possessiveness. Finally, with the help of the archangel Raphael, Tobias manages to drive Asmodeus away using special incense, and only then can he marry Sarah. This story pretty much cemented Asmodeus as the classic demon representing lust. Now, the lust we're talking about here isn't just normal romantic love between people. It's that out-of-control, impure kind of carnal desire that's all about satisfying oneself physically without any regard for the other person's feelings or well-being. It taints sacred union, turning it into a purely transactional act, and twists love into possession and destruction. Asmodeus symbolizes that kind of irrational passion that can destroy marriages, corrupt morals, and throw society into chaos. His beef with God is that he challenges the sanctity of marriage and the order of love established by God. He tries to replace deep, lasting emotional connections with fleeting, empty physical pleasure, dragging people into the abyss of desire and leaving their souls restless. Core analysis. Civilization's echoes under the shadow of sin. All right, folks, now that we've gone through the biographies of these 7 princes of hell one by one, what we're seeing isn't just 7 isolated demon figures. It's more like a complex tapestry woven from human weaknesses, divine light, cultural imagination, and the weight of history. So now, let's dig a little deeper and explore how these concepts have created lasting ripples across the broader landscape of civilization. Dark muses of literature and art. from the Divine Comedy to Faust. Like we mentioned earlier, the seven deadly sins have been an endless well of inspiration for artists. In Dante's Inferno, he didn't just list out sins. With incredible imagination, he built a superstructured, multi-layered hell, assigning deeply symbolic punishments to different sinners based on how bad their crimes were. For example, the greedy are forced to push huge boulders, symbolizing their pointless chase for wealth in life. The gluttonous suffer in vile, sludgy rain, reflecting their messy lives. This kind of specific visual depiction made abstract sins feel totally real. And when we look at the literary giants after the Renaissance, think of Goethe's Faust, who makes a pact with the devil Mephistopheles to get unlimited knowledge and experience. All the temptations Mephistopheles offers, they pretty much all line up with the seven deadly sins: pride in knowledge, greed and gluttony for worldly pleasures, and irrational craving for lust. Faust's struggle is the eternal tug of war of humanity caught between divine and demonic temptations. And that's not even mentioning the countless painters, from anonymous medieval artists to modern masters, who used color, light and shadow, and composition to make these abstract sins concrete. For instance, Hieronymus Bosch's tabletop painting, The Seven Deadly Sins and the Four Last Things, depicts the specific ways these sins showed up in society at the time in an almost grotesque way, full of satire and warning. And Baroque masters like Caravaggio were experts at using strong light-dark contrasts and dramatic facial expressions to capture the psychological tension of a sin the moment it happens. Deep dives into moral philosophy and the realm of psychology. The concept of the seven deadly sins has long gone beyond just religion. It's become a go-to reference point in Western moral philosophy and even modern psychology when talking about human nature. The early church fathers carefully broke down these sins, like distinguishing between sins of thought and sins of action, and exploring the roots and stages of sin. This laid the groundwork for later ethical thinking. It's interesting to note that sloth, in the early Middle Ages, was called aestia. Originally, it didn't mean physical laziness, but something much scarier. A withering of the soul, losing interest in God, in life, in everything good, and falling into deep despair and numbness. This state was considered one of the devil's sneakiest attacks because it could directly destroy the foundation of a person's faith. And get this, it's strikingly similar to some modern psychological descriptions of depression or existential emptiness. When we talk about narcissistic personality disorder, don't you see a shadow of pride there? When we analyze addictive behaviors, isn't there often an underlying, uncontrolled gluttony or greed for something? The fact that anger management is such a big deal in modern society just shows the destructive power this ancient sin of wrath still has today. These old labels for sins actually give us a useful vocabulary for understanding and analyzing negative human behavior patterns. Sin and punishment through social change, a historical lens. What's interesting is that in different historical periods, society's tolerance level and focus regarding these seven deadly sins have varied. For example, in medieval feudal society, with its rigid hierarchy, pride, especially challenging divine or monarchical authority, was seen as a huge sin. But fast forward to the rise of capitalism, and even though the Bible's warnings about greed were still ringing in people's ears, a certain amount of profit-seeking motive was actually seen as a driver of social development. This made defining and criticizing greed a lot more complicated. Take sloth, for another example. In societies where the Puritan work ethic was big, emphasizing hard work, sloth was harshly condemned. But today, with changes in work models and the pace of life, discussions about work-life balance and rejecting burnout are making us rethink the line between sloth and rest. Even the meaning of lust has been constantly evolving. From the early church's strict limits on any sexual activity not aimed at procreation, to modern society's emphasis on individual sexual rights and the gradual acceptance of different sexual orientations, the tension and changes there reflect a massive shift in societal moral views. This historical dynamic shows us that the seven deadly sins aren't some rigid, dead and gone dogma. They're more like cultural DNA living within the body of human society, showing different symptoms and expressions as the social environment changes. Historical echoes and today's reflections. So, Folks, as we journey back through thousands of years of historical fog to re-examine these 7 princes of hell and the 7 deadly sins they represent, what do we really see? We see the eternal battlefield within human nature, the unending tug of war between light and darkness. These ancient sins, they're like a genetic code etched into humanity's collective subconscious. They whisper in Homer's epics, roar in Shakespeare's tragedies, interrogate souls in Dostoevsky's novels, and they're still playing out in different disguises in our news headlines, social media feeds, and everyday lives today. From Lucifer's arrogant declaration of "I am the light," to Mammon's endless lust for gold from Leviathan's deep-sea envy, to Satan's all-consuming rage from Belphegor's wool-sapping sloth, to Beelzebub's all-devouring gluttony, and Asmodeus's reason-burning lust, these 7 shades of darkness make up the 7 dimensions of humanity's abyss. They aren't just bad guys in religious stories, they're shadows that can exist inside every one of us. Getting to know them, understanding them, isn't about wallowing in fear or despair. It's about better steering our own ships as we sail the sea of life. Like the ancient Greek saying goes, "Know thyself." Knowing our inner light also means bravely facing our inner darkness. So, in today's world, with more material wealth than ever, information at our fingertips, and temptations everywhere, what do these 7 deadly sins mean for us? Have they just put on more stylish, more deceptive disguises? And how do we, in this digital Tower of Babel, keep our souls clear and free? That, perhaps, is a question each of us needs a lifetime to think about and answer. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope today's deep dive has given you some fresh insights. If you have any deeper thoughts on this topic, or want to share your own unique perspectives, please go wild in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll keep exploring more mysteries hidden in the depths of history and culture. See you next time.